machines have control. What you gonna do? Subjugating, perpetrating violence onto you. Look around because they're everywhere, slowly closing in. Soon they'll be a part of you, like living flesh and skin. Anti-hero underground, organic machine destroyers, existing in a state of war and constant paranoia. Media saturation, government denial, slated for extermination with our names kept on file. Sabotage syndicate, fighting to survive. Cold concrete machines keep you alive. They occupy your consciousness to keep your soul distracted with a multitude of useless thoughts and penetrating tactics. You cannot escape because they have already found you, closer than you can imagine. Take a moment, look around you, because they're everywhere. Slowly closing in, and the line between man and machine is wearing thin. Cyborgs are among you, living and taking from you. Some of them carry badges and electric guns to stun you. They patrol the border of your thoughtful contemplation, pretending to be partisans of equal limitations.
Well, we'll be starting our U.S. news section here with an outrageous article from The Independent. American football, underage sex trade booming at Super Bowl. A very disturbing sign of the degeneracy of our culture here in America. While millions of people were getting supersized on their superfood and super beer watching the Super Bowl, there were young girls being used as prostitutes in Dallas at an extraordinary rate, and few seem to even care. The article states, pimps will traffic thousands of underage prostitutes to Texas for today's Super Bowl, hoping to do business with men arriving for the game with money to burn. Up to 300,000 girls between 11 and 17 are lured into this U.S. sex industry annually. 90% of runaways and children whose parents force them to leave home fall into the trade and are often beaten, drugged, raped, or imprisoned to force compliance. This is a vile, degrading, and downright evil aspect of human society that takes place all over the world and is often encouraged by the power elite, the super rich, and the psychopaths of our society. An excellent documentary about this sick activity and how it reaches the highest levels of Congress is called The Conspiracy of Silence and is highly recommended by us if you would like to learn who is involved in this and how it can be stopped. It is free online, and also it was prevented from airing on television after it had already been put into the TV guide by the highest levels of Congress. So this definitely is something that goes very high up.
Yeah, and taxpayer revenues paid for the lost ad revenues. Next up, we've got from the WTAE Pittsburgh, feds check post-vaccine seizures in young kids. The FDA recognizes that 36 children from 6 to 24 months got fevers and seizures within a day of the vaccine. Sanofi Pasteur's Fluzone is the only vaccine approved for the youngest age groups, so they have a monopoly on a constant share of the population. In Australia and New England, there is also a recent high rate of adverse reactions to flu shots from CSL Biotherapies. Watch Vaccine Nation to learn more about the vaccine obsession in America. It's free online on Google Video. Don't try to outsource and bypass your children's immune system by taking foreign injections for somebody's profit.
From The Guardian, 26 states join Obama healthcare lawsuit in the U.S. Over half the states in the country have now joined a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the healthcare mandate signed by President Obama, which requires all Americans to buy health insurance by 2014. They argue that it is not within the government's power to force individuals to buy something from private corporations. They also contest that the law is effectively an unfunded mandate because the new law gives the states the impossible choice of accepting the new costs or, as punishment, forfeiting federal health care funding. The Supreme Court is likely to have the final say in this argument, and the story will continue to be covered by us.
And now from the BBC, Florida judge strikes down Obama's health care law. A federal judge ruled Obamacare's forced premiums a violation of people's rights and struck down the entire act. Congress must operate within the bounds established by the Constitution, Judge Roger Vinson wrote. The Department of Justice is appealing the ruling, which may end up in the Supreme Court. For a nation of lethargic, malnutrition, and diseased people, the solution isn't sick care, but preventative medicine, exercise, and healthy food. Screw bailouts for the insurance companies to nurse a terminally ill way of life.
From ABC News, U.S. says too much fluoride causing splotchy teeth. The federal government has finally taken the recommendations of scientists lobbying the Environmental Protection Agency to reduce the amount of fluoride that is permissible in drinking water. Quote, one reason behind the change, about 2 out of 5 adolescents have tooth streaking or spottiness because of too much fluoride. In extreme cases, teeth can be pitted by the mineral. Fluorosis is unexpectedly common in youngsters ages 12 through 15 and appears to have grown more common since the 1980s. High intake of fluoride can also increase the risk of brittle bones, fractures, and crippling bone abnormalities. If you would really like to know more about fluoride, I suggest reading a Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS, on sodium fluoride, which you can find easily anywhere on the internet.
More on fluoride news from the New York Daily News. City Poll wants remove fluoride from New York's drinking water, citing safety concerns. Councilman Peter Vallone is determined to remove fluoride from New York's drinking water after nearly half a century of the practice. He says this amounts to forced medication by the government. What's next? They decide we're depressed and add Prozac to our drinking water? Actually, it's somewhat true considering Prozac's active ingredient is a fluoride compound, fluoxetine. Nevertheless, 72% of our water supply in the U.S. is treated with fluoride, which is a waste product of numerous major industries that was converted into an asset. You can watch the fluoride deception to learn more about that, free online, Google Video. Hopefully New York can set a precedent and start to reverse this troubling trend.
From The Atlantic, Lies, Damned Lies, and Medical Science, an in-depth analysis of Dr. John Ioannidis' recent controversial papers that have helped bring to light the issue of how sound scientific and specifically medical research actually is. Ioannidis has worked at Harvard University, Johns Hopkins University, and the National Institutes of Health, to name a few of his qualifications. According to Ioannidis' papers, which have been widely publicized in the scientific community, 80% of non-randomized studies, by far the most common type, turn out to be wrong, as do 25% of supposedly gold standard randomized trials. The article spelled out his belief that researchers were frequently manipulating data analysis, chasing career-advancing findings rather than good science, and even using the peer review process to suppress opposing views. Until these types of unethical practices are exposed, halted, and punished, people will increasingly not trust new medical research and findings.
Now from Time Magazine, top 10 pharmaceutical drugs linked to violence. A new study from the Institute for Safe Medication Practices specifies 31 drugs associated with violence towards others. The top 10 makes users 7.9 to 18 times more violent. Here's the list starting with number 10. Pristic, Effexor, Luvox, Halcyon, Strattera, Lariam, various amphetamines, Paxil, Prozac, and Chantix. Chantix, FYI, is a smoking cessation drug from Pfizer. Time says despite the high risks of violent behavior, Chantix has, quote, slightly superior quit rates, adding, quote, it shouldn't necessarily be ruled out as an option. Sweden, with the lowest smoking-related illnesses in the world, uses smokeless tobacco like hookah, e-cigarettes, or snus to quit at a higher success rate than with drug alternatives. Most of the others are for emotional problems in the top 10 list, and they are certainly meditative and spiritual alternatives for these maladies.
From the New York Times, a federal research center will help develop medicines. It discusses the plans of the Obama administration to fund $1 billion towards a pharmacological research center researching into new drugs, especially drugs focused on mental health issues. Under the plan, more than $700 million in research projects already underway at various institutes and centers would be brought together at the new center. This comes at a time when research by private drug companies has been on the decline. From Shattered Limits, this is kind of a wild story. Domino's Pizza apparently received $12 million in government bailout while exports warn of global food riots. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has given Domino's $12 million to use for a marketing campaign advertising a new pizza with 40% more cheese. A good use of taxpayer money indeed.
Yeah, I'll help fund some more arterial issues for the healthcare industry. Now from Yahoo Finance, we have too big to fail. Lockheed Martin's, quote, got their fingers everywhere, says author. William Hartung, author of Prophets of War, says Lockheed Martin is unfortunately too big to fail and receives $36 billion in government contracts. Hartung actually claims Lockheed Martin operates as a shadow government and criticizes them for doing a poor job, having huge cost overruns, and needing bailouts in the 70s. Also, involvement in monolithic bribery scandals. Now they're involved in everything like the IRS, Census, CIA, FBI, NSA, USPS, and TSA. Hartung refers to Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex and is alarmed at the revolving door of lobbyists and government officials. Hartung also calls out the neoconservatives and Project for the New American Century for facilitating wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Continuing on from the dailybail.com, Washington and the wealthy getting rich at your expenses, says David K. Johnston. This headline is a short video clip you can watch online that discusses the way corporate subsidies and double standard tax policies on the part of the government have increased the disparity between rich and poor in our country, over the last few decades especially. Most notably is a $600 million loan that was given to Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest people on the planet, by the federal government and does not need to be paid back for 34 years, with zero interest. Boy, I wish we could get a loan like that.
Yeah, we could wage an epic propaganda campaign if we had that kind of fun.
Launch a satellite.
Yeah, that would be sweet. Next up from the New York Times via CNBC, study points to windfall for Goldman partners. Goldman Sachs has a partner system with an elite group of 475 people who are not publicly disclosed. In 10 years, current and former partners have cashed out on $20 billion and hold about $10 billion currently. Members have included former Treasury Secretaries Henry Paulson and Robert Rubin, former Governor of New Jersey John Corzine, and William Dudley, the President of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
From UPI, AT&T faces lawsuit over billing. In what should turn out to be a massive class action lawsuit, AT&T is being accused of increasing data transaction amounts of individual customers by 7 to 14% through a rigged data collection and billing system, thereby charging customers extra money for something they didn't use.
Next from CNBC, Bank of America's Countrywide accused of massive fraud. A dozen plus insurance companies which invested in B of A's acquisition, Countrywide Financial, have filed a couple 100-page suit alleging massive fraud by presenting falsified data to investors of mortgage-backed securities from 2005 to 2007. Risky mortgage applications allegedly rejected by an automated system were then put through, quote, exception processing systems, which matched any competing lender. They gave out quantity rather than quality mortgages and contributed to the housing bubble by refusing to deny applicants. And now there are thousands of people who are suffering as a consequence.
Yeah, following up on that from Reuters, Allstate sues B of A and Mozilla, the CEO, over Countrywide losses. Details a lawsuit which has been filed by Allstate against Bank of America Corp., its Countrywide lending unit, and 17 other defendants for allegedly misrepresenting the risks of more than $700 million of mortgage securities it bought from Countrywide.
Next from Zero Hedge, JP Morgan told judge to stop paying mortgage to become eligible for loan modification. JP Morgan offered Peter Sikora, a juvenile court judge in Ohio, a renegotiated mortgage if he defaulted on his payments. This apparently would make JP Morgan eligible for taxpayer funds, which sponsor what the author calls the too parasitic to fail. After defaulting for a year, the bank blindsided Sikora with a foreclosure lawsuit as they both conspired to scam the system together. Sikora ran for the Ohio Supreme Court unsuccessfully 3 times.
From the Midas letter, a U.S. Treasury Secretary admits U.S. default is imminent. In an arresting example of avarice on the part of the Treasury Department, Timothy Geithner, head of the Treasury, has warned Congress that, quote, failure to raise the national debt limit would precipitate a default by the United States. Default would effectively impose a significant and long-lasting tax on all Americans and all American businesses, and could lead to the loss of millions of American jobs. Payments on a broad range of benefits and other U.S. obligations would be discontinued, limited, or adversely affected, including U.S. military salaries and retirement benefits, Social Security and Medicare benefits, veterans benefits, and student loan payments, and much more. The author of this article makes an excellent point when he states, I am personally stunned. No mention is made of sales of assets held by the United States government. Rather than liquidate its own real estate to cover its debt, the defective and fiduciarily delinquent U.S. government plans to first eradicate the incomes of its poorest citizens.
Now from Reuters, accounting tweak could save the Fed from losses. To pay off its debts, the Fed set their own guidelines to prevent insolvency. Instead of posting a loss on their balance sheets, the Fed will now stash losses in the form of liabilities with its regional reserve banks. They pretty much rigged the game so that they can't ever lose, even when they are losing. Kind of like an undead zombie bank. And yes, they do want to eat your brains. What's left of them anyways.
From the Daily Mail, foreclosure chaos in U.S. after court voids bank seizure of homes because of lax mortgage paperwork. It follows the possible repercussions of a recent court ruling that says Wells Fargo and U.S. Bancorp lacked authority to foreclose after having failed to make the required showing that they were the holders of the mortgages at the time of foreclosure. This has caused some banks to hold off on seizing people's homes and is hopefully a sign of some justice to come against the banks that are hugely responsible for the current economic depression.
From CNBC, housing market slips into depression. U.S. home values fell 26% in the last 4.5 years, which beats the 25.9% from 28 to 33 during the Great Depression. The article suggests the economy is revving back to life, but that's just another government line of propaganda regurgitated. So long as we consider the economy to be an abstract entity which is tethered to our well-being, the longer we will be taken on these financial roller coasters.
From the Economic Collapse blog, warning signs. This article outlines 20 warning signs that an economic collapse is imminent. Some of those warning signs include that the price of corn is up a staggering 94% since last June. The United Nations is projecting that the global price of food will increase by 30% in 2011. The U.S. government is currently borrowing about 40 cents of every single dollar that it spends. And the U.S. government will have the biggest budget deficit ever recorded, approximately $1.5 trillion this year. Add into this equation the revolutions taking place in the Middle East right now and what could happen to fuel prices, and anyone can see that this fake debt bubble on which modern America was created has to pop sometime.
Certainly not going to cushion a $1.5 trillion of debt slavery. Now from the Trentonian, Camden police and firefighters turn in badges and helmets. A sixth of government employees were cut in Camden, New Jersey. Nearly half the police and a third of firefighters were laid off. Camden's population of 80,000 is vastly in poverty and mostly black and Hispanic. An anti-crime volunteer group, the Guardian Angels, promises to help patrol the area as it has in Newark after similar layoffs. People need to take care of themselves rather than rely on the governments. A simple study of Gary Webb's article series, Dark Alliance, dissects the CIA's drug-dealing activities in American cities behind many inner-city problems, which thwarted a legitimate civil rights movement.
From Yahoo News and the AP, Social Security, posting $600 billion deficit over 10 years, warns that Social Security will not only post a $600 billion deficit over the next 10 years, but that the Social Security Trust Fund will indeed run out of money completely by 2037, just 26 years from now. This is a frightening prospect for everyone, but especially the kids in our generation who will be in their 50s when Social Security runs out.
Next up from the Intel Hub, FEMA requests information on the availability of 140 million packets of food, blankets, and body bags. FEMA has issued a call for information on these materials through the federal businessopportunities.gov website. A disaster scenario is slated to involve the New Madrid fault line in Missouri, which scientists say is overdue for a major event. The article provides .gov links to proof of FEMA camps and major drills in May. Even the Navy is requesting underwater body bags in conjunction with emergency response under DHS. The Post author insists that this may be more than an eerie coincidence amidst global turmoil over food and urges citizens to be prepared for emergencies.
Man faces $30,000 in fines for growing too many vegetables in his yard. This is absolutely outrageous, and you'll just have to watch for yourself.
But there's only one nanny of the month, and this time it's Burrell Ellis, CEO of DeKalb County, Georgia, for cracking down on organic vegetables.
A DeKalb County man will soon be in court for growing too many vegetables.
That's Steve Miller. He's grown veggies in his garden for 15 years, but now faces about 30 grand in fines and legal fees because the county says he's violating zoning laws.
Neighbors have started calling this ongoing battle Cabbagegate.
Miller did get his property rezoned, but code enforcement officers are still on his case, since Miller, they say, was breaking the law before the rezoning. Strange behavior for a place that calls itself the greenest county in America.
It's gotten me into trouble and I can't understand why.
Check back next month for more examples of busybodies minding your own business.
Next up from Natural News, more on some food regulatory insanity. Raw milk farmer wins victory against county over illegal sales. In 2009, undercover agents tricked farmer Armand Betchard's daughters into selling raw milk, which is legal if sold from the farm only. At a legal drop point for existing customers, agents convinced them to sell extra milk, something they never would have done. This case was dismissed by Circuit Judge Daniel Imhoff, citing the statute of limitations and that Betchard was not the proper target of the suit, but his daughters were. Betchard lost with a public defender, but represented himself in his appeal to circuit court. I can't imagine being some snake who sets up farmers for selling raw milk. What kind of system promotes this activity? One which thrives on tyranny and control.
Absolutely. From the Des Moines Register, USDA drops planting curbs on biotech alfalfa. This follows a case that has been ongoing between biotechnology industries, spearheaded by Monsanto, and the organic industries over the use of a genetically modified strain of alfalfa. The debate centered around cross-pollination concerns of organic farmers who have fields near where GMO food is grown. The Secretary of Agriculture made the decision that the government will not restrict where farmers can plant GM alfalfa. So it seems cross-pollination and the eventual destruction of an entire species' evolution, as has already happened with other life forms, is inevitable unless people who still care about life on this planet do something, and fast.
Yeah, it's sad because it's not really consistent with that ruling about pesticides. Well, next up from Grist, top USDA bee researcher also found Bayer pesticide harmful to honeybees. A previously leaked EPA document proved concern over pesticides causing colony collapse disorder, which threatens bee populations and pollination vital to our crops and life as we know it. Jeffrey Pettis, the USDA's lead researcher of their bee research laboratory, concluded a nicotine-derived chemical from Bayer is part of the cause 2 years ago. The chemical, even at low levels, increased susceptibility to pathogens, effectively destroying the bees' immune systems. The author finds it troubling that he learned about such an epic issue through the UK's Independent and a little-known documentary called The Strange Disappearance of the Honeybee. If people don't stop pesticide usage, we may cripple a crucial part of the plant's ecology and our survival.
From Farm Wars, the USDA's Organic Deception is an in-depth look at the laws regulating the use of the term organic to advertise food as well as animal feed. What is suggested is that big corporations have been slowly buying up the whole organic market and relabeling things as, quote, certified organic or contains organic ingredients. And the USDA and FDA have been allowing varying percentages of non-organic, even toxic ingredients into these products. Essentially, people are being fooled by so-called organic labels. Only if something is labeled 100% organic is it 100% organic. Lawyers love to play games with language, so watch out. You don't know what you could be ingesting.
Yeah, I mean, these corporations love to exploit markets and deceive people, and one of the only ways to really know is to grow your own food or know the people that grow it, so buying local. And now from New York Daily News, more troubling food news. Taco Bell is using false advertising when it calls its food beef, according to a new lawsuit. A class action lawsuit was filed not for money, but honesty about what's in Taco Bell's food. The so-called beef in Taco Bell food is actually barely a third beef and mostly, quote, binders, extenders, preservatives, additives, and other agents. Sounds disgusting to me. This is against USDA rules. Taco Bell's own website ingredients seem damning, yet they plan to countersue for false statements. With McDonald's food able to resist decomposition and knowing about advanced meat recovery, I stopped believing that stuff was food years ago.
From the Star Advertiser, Natural Selection, a self-sufficient system of farming is increasing yields across Hawaii. A bit of positive news here and something to look towards as a solution to many of the problems that we've been discussing. This story covers a folksy South Korean master farmer known as Han Kyo-cho and his methods of natural farming, which is a, quote, self-sufficient system to raise crops and livestock with resources available on the farm. Rather than applying chemical fertilizers, farmers boost the beneficial microbes that occur naturally in the soil by collecting and culturing them with everyday ingredients such as steamed rice and brown sugar. His methods have helped create the first odor-free pig farms and have helped show the way toward local sustainable farm practices to people around the world.
Now from San Jose Mercury Times, Pennsylvania allows dumping of tainted waters from gas boom. So-called natural gas has a nasty waste byproduct, salty water with toxic heavy metals such as barium, radium, and strontium. A practice called fracking involves millions of gallons of water with chemicals and sand injected into shale to shatter the rock and release the gas. Usually disposed of in other state laws by injecting it deep into the earth, Pennsylvania allows wastewater to be disposed of in waterways. Some public water utilities have had a difficult time staying under trihalomethane limits, which cause cancer over continued exposure. The drilling wastewater has circumvented regulations which should protect the Delaware River Basin, which supplies 15 million people with drinking water. One company, Cabot Oil and Gas, trucked 44,000 barrels of waste to a suburb where the waste was discharged into a creek, poisoning 300,000 people's water. They say this shouldn't have happened, of course, only after the fact. The state says that they are cracking down and drillers are backing off the practice, but it seems too little too late, or it could just be good PR. Basic negligence should be the basis for legal recourse, like revoking a corporate charter and taking its assets.
From the Oneida Daily Dispatch, Pennsylvania official John Hanger defends fracking charges. After this toxification process was exposed, the Secretary of Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection said he believes the new regulations are adequate to protect water supplies. Another example of government officials siding with big business and not with the health and well-being of its citizens.
Yeah, that would make you sick too. Next up, from University of California, San Francisco, study identifies chemicals in pregnant women. The bodies of all pregnant women appear to harbor all or most of 163 chemicals, some of which have been illegal for decades. BPAs, PCBs, PAHs, PBDEs, PFCs, phenols, perchlorate, which is a rocket fuel additive found in our water, and more were tested for. A press release from UCSF states several of these chemicals in pregnant women were at the same concentrations that have been associated with negative effects in children from other studies. Also, they mention a mixture of chemicals may have a more severe health threat. Ultimately, we need to halt the wretched industries that poison the environment and our bodies. It is clear that even if we stop now, the effects will be felt for decades, if not centuries.
From the Daily Mail, a blowback for Obama in his Gulf oil spill inquiry, as reports suggest U.S. government should share responsibility. A report released by Obama's Presidential Commission has stated that the U.S. government should share responsibility for the environmental catastrophe that occurred in the Gulf of Mexico last summer. Up until now, the government has been trying to blame BP only and refusing to take any responsibility for their lack of regulatory measures and safety enforcement. This means BP will have to pay much less in liability lawsuits and damages because the government will also be footing the bill. We must decide how foreign companies should operate on our sovereign territory, not the other way around. Corporations will not regulate themselves.
Yeah, it's also quite troubling because now the government says that they're potentially liable, then they're kind of falling on the sword legally, and they're going to make it much more complicated for legal justice to be had. Now from the Christian Science Monitor, Bye Bye Blackbird, USDA acknowledges a hand in one mass bird death. A USDA Wildlife Service program from the 60s called Bye Bye Blackbird was used recently to kill 5,000 birds that were allegedly damaging cattle feed in Nebraska. They deny having part in other mysterious bird deaths across the country, but in 2009 killed 4 million birds with a poison called DRC 1339. The poison is supposedly species-specific, but the material safety data sheet says it causes depression, bloody urine, and other effects on humans. While people cry about how birds are at risk for wind farm technology, birds are being exterminated for farms.
Yeah, from the Press Democrat, Sonoma County mystery, what killed 100 birds near Geyserville. We had a local incident of bird deaths as well that occurred in Sonoma County where over 100 birds were found dead near the highway. Just an example here, this has actually been going on all across the entire world, in places from Sweden to China, and it's pretty wild that it's going on.
Yeah, there's actually a Google map showing the epicenters of these events. Next up from Alternet, government experiments on U.S. Vietnam War veterans. Shocking claims come to light in new court case. A suit against the CIA and U.S. Army on behalf of Vietnam Veterans of America and 6 former soldiers seeks medical care for side effects of classified experiments at the U.S. Army's Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland from 1950 to 1975. Participants say they were not fully informed of the risks and the nature of the test. It is a fact that human experiments took place which, quote, involved testing of nerve agents, nerve agent antidotes, psychochemicals, and irritants, as noted in a '94 GAO report called Human Experimentation, an Overview on Cold War-Era Programs. The report notes experimentation on hundreds of thousands of healthy children, adults, prisoners, and psychiatric patients, many involuntary or misinformed subjects. A CIA official recognizes MKUltra testing occurred, but insists the records were destroyed. Veteran Affairs admits testing, quote, hundreds of chemical and biological substances, including LSD. A 1950 Supreme Court ruling lay precedent that they can't sue for injuries from the line of duty. The case is in appeal in the Ninth Circuit Court. The lawyer, Spammer, says that his father died from radiogenic diseases at his middle age, along with others who participated in nuclear testing during Operation Crossroads. He lost the case on those victims' behalf in '92 and takes cases other lawyers won't, saying, quote, it's really sad because the veterans are left holding the bag, and it's not a very pretty bag. I guess this is why Henry Kissinger called the military dumb, stupid animals and pawns.
Yep, people who like to use people will definitely say things like that. Totally. From Police One, the federalization of local law enforcement discusses the ongoing process by the federal government to take control financially or legally of local police forces. It states the new administration included $1 billion in the stimulus package to hire 7,000 new officers in 2009 and 2010. The House pledged an additional $1.8 billion over the next 5 years to provide 50,000 federally paid local officers. In other words, over time, the federal government will be paying the cost of tens of thousands of police officers nationwide. This is a frightening prospect for police and citizens who still believe in local control and local decisions, and should be resisted, especially by our local police.
Now from the Miami New Times, more troubling police state news. Miami-Dade police force buys drones. With more than 7,000 being used overseas, Miami-Dade will be the first large city police force to use unmanned aerial vehicles bought from defense contractor Honeywell. The FAA has not yet approved a drone for flight in urban areas, so this would set a precedent. It is believed that the T-Hawk model will be used, which has cameras, 46-mile-per-hour speeds at altitudes up to 10,000 plus feet, and a 40-minute cruising time. This technology poses enormous threats to privacy, and I bet cops will get a kick peeking where their eyes should not be. Welcome to the Panopticon.
From Press TV, CIA advisor states extraordinary rendition legal and a sick display of contempt for human rights. Daniel Pines, an assistant general counsel at the Central Intelligence Agency, has claimed that the practice of abducting terror suspects overseas and sending them to a third country for interrogation is legal under U.S. law, even if the suspects are to be tortured at black site prisons. It is absolutely despicable and evil that Americans would defend and advocate torture. People must realize that when one person's rights and dignity are violated, the whole of humanity's rights and dignity is violated.
Indeed. Now from MSNBC, 170 million Mock City rises at Marine Base. A 274-acre, 1,500-plus building facility the size of downtown San Diego is at 29 Palms Military Base, and is being used to train Marines in urban warfare skills to be used around the world and host up to 15,000 plus troops for simulated warfare. There are mock villages at other bases across the country. Camp Pendleton's village quadrupled in size after a $30 million expansion with, quote, a maze of mud walls leading to mosques, schools, and carpet sellers, as Hollywood-style explosions go off. A regular demolition Disneyland, it appears. While thinking people are considered terrorists and peaceful protesters being raided, just imagine what this training can do at home following another false flag.
From World News Insight, citizen spy networks to get immunity, a horrifying bill has been introduced by House Homeland Security Chairman Pete King, titled the See Something, Say Something Act. It is intended to, quote, protect any individual involved in any snoop campaign from lawsuits brought by innocent people wrongly accused of being terrorists or extremists. So people can just turn in their neighbors, people they don't like, or people they have grudges against, even if they are completely innocent, just to have the government thugs hassle them. And there will be no recourse or justice for the victims of these modern-day Salem witch trials.
Yeah, and don't think that this isn't what's happening over in Iraq and Afghanistan as well. It's a pretty troubling thing, and I would hate to see it here as well, but it's just as unjust. From the Daily Mail UK, we've got Chicago artist protests backfires as he faces 15 years in jail because he recorded his own arrest on video. Chris Drew may be imprisoned under the Eavesdropping Act for filming his protest about restrictions on selling art. Selling dollar silkscreen prints, Drew resorted to civil disobedience to protest what he feels are draconian laws. He was oblivious of the act and says, quote, when you fight for your rights, you have to expect anything. I have a 60s bent to me. I won't back down. I won't be intimidated. The act applies in 12 states, and apparently Maryland, Massachusetts, and Illinois are the only states where it's illegal to record a conversation with a police officer. There is a 3-year minimum for first-time offenses, but recording a judge, attorney general, state attorney, or police officer warrants up to 15 years in jail. If you are a public servant, you should expect to be recorded. For quality assurance purposes, of course, this is an absurd preemptive act at preventing evidence of abuse by the police state.
Yeah, if you don't want to be recorded, don't work in public, public government or any type of thing like that at all.
Exactly.
From the Activist Post, TSA checkpoint confrontation, video used in lawsuit, man acquitted. In a victory for air travelers everywhere, a man arrested for allegedly not showing ID and videotaping in an airport has been acquitted of all charges. Here is Philip Moak in his own words.
It's been a long time. I do feel good. I feel particularly good that we have police and TSA on record saying that you don't have to show ID to fly, and that you can use a camera in an airport.
Glad that worked out for him. At least he wasn't charged under the Eavesdropping Act.
Yeah.
From Huffington Post, U.S. Capitol evacuated over unauthorized aircraft in airspace. This is just an example of what should have happened on 9/11 if protocols were followed. When Congress wasn't even in session on a Saturday, an aircraft approaching lost radio contact. House and Senate offices were evacuated and almost the White House itself. F-16s were scrambled immediately and the craft reestablished contact before landing safely. The FAA and the Secret Service then interviewed the pilot, who, if deemed a threat, would have been shot down like Flight 93 appears to have been on 9/11, and even Rumsfeld appears to have had a Freudian slip about himself.
Have a sense, if we imagine the kind of world we would face if the people who bombed the Best Hall in Mosul, or the people who did the bombing in Spain, or the people who attacked the United States in New York, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania and attacked the Pentagon.
From the East Side Patriot, welcome home, boys. TSA interrogates our soldiers, is a letter written by an Army sergeant describing the treatment by the TSA goons of returning soldiers from Afghanistan. They were harassed not in Afghanistan or Ireland, but in Indiana by TSA thugs who have nothing better to do but steal Gerber multi-tools and nail clippers from returning veterans. What a ridiculous waste of money. And finally, the soldiers are starting to agree.
Yeah, pretty much everybody's considered an enemy. Guilty before innocent in this system, as long as you're not killing innocent people overseas, I guess. From Infowars.com, TSA now forcing opt-outs to walk through body scanners. A Baltimore man was forced by TSA to walk through a body scanner, which he was assured was off, in an apparent attempt to condition the public that they cannot refuse the body scanners. His son wondered why they then gave him the enhanced pat-down, grabbing his crotch and backside. That's fun to explain to your children, huh? During a Thanksgiving holiday revolt against body scanners, it was revealed that TSA actually employed more blatantly sexually violating pat-downs as a psychologically coercive measure to make passengers go through the machines they jokingly refer to as dick measurers. We need to revolt and stop subjecting ourselves to this. These machines should be ripped from airports, regardless of how many sheeple walk through them, so-called willingly. Stop the perpetual naked X-ray collection of travelers, especially children, and harmful radiation exposure, as noted by Columbia University and numerous scientific bodies.
From NBC Miami, Florida professor arrested for having a suspicious bagel on a plane. In another example of our fellow citizens turning into citizen spies, a professor at the University of North Florida was taken off a plane because passengers reported he had a suspicious bag. The bag turned out to contain a set of keys, a bagel with cream cheese, some other small food items, a hat, and a wallet.
Yeah, I wonder if that was a donut in that bag, if it would have been the cops' jurisdiction nearby. But next up we got from Mother Jones, forget your junk, the TSA wants to feel up your mind. Currently there are TSA behavior detection officers as part of screening passengers by observational techniques. SPOT, used to try and sift out people attempting to get away with something. This program from 2004 to 2008 flagged over 150,000 people, of which less than 1,100 were arrested for having issues with drugs, fake documents, outstanding warrants, or were illegal immigrants. Nothing terrorist in fashion. The GAO states no scientific basis for this system, but TSA still invested $20 million into the face scanning future attribute screening technology. Even the creator of this method, behavioral scientist Paul Ekman, warns against having machines in charge. The strategy would prove futile for terrorists who show no emotions. I know the real terrorists are the fascist interests behind the September 11 attacks, who could easily be brought to justice with that $20 million as budget.
From MIT and National News, social networking leads to isolation, not more connections, say academics. This covers a new book that has been published by MIT professor Sherry Turkle titled Alone Together, that says that the online social world is destroying real communication, dumbing down society, and leading to a society of people that have no idea how to actually function in the real world. Sites such as Facebook, Twitter, and MySpace are prime examples, Turkle says. As much as online communication has helped connect our world and is a benefit to everybody, it is important to remember to cultivate good and honest relationships with people outside of the internet world as well.
Next up from CBS, U.S. subpoenas WikiLeaks Twitter account info. More abuse of social networking for government data collection. The subpoena names past WikiLeaks collaborators like Private First Class Bradley Manning. who is in prison currently for revealing the brutal collateral murder video showing U.S. gunship murdering Reuters journalists Namir Nur-el-Din and Saeed Chamak, an innocent civilian. Also subpoenaed are Birgitta Jonsdottir, an Icelandic parliamentarian, Dutch hacker Rob Gongrip, and U.S. programmer Jacob Appelbaum. Instead of investigating war crimes, whistleblowers are criminalized and harassed. The subpoena was confidential, but somehow became public in January due to legal action by Twitter, according to WikiLeaks.
From Computer World, FBI executes 40 search warrants in quest for Anonymous. In a worldwide investigation and crackdown on the politically motivated hacker group aptly called Anonymous, U.S. authorities said more than 40 search warrants have been executed in the U.S. in connection with last month's web-based attacks against companies that had severed ties with WikiLeaks. This is indeed quite a frightening situation when pimply-faced teenage hackers are being raided by federal marshals for allegedly sending packet requests to various companies' servers. Shouldn't the government be spending its time getting rid of the national debt instead?
From the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF uncovers widespread intelligence violations from the FBI. The EFF issued a report on 7,000 FBI investigated violations showing, quote, the most complete picture of post-9/11 FBI intelligence abuses available to the public. After a FOIA request they filed, the EFF reviewed 2,500 pages of FBI intelligence violations reported to a Civilian Intelligence Oversight Committee from 2001 to 2008. The report exposes, quote, alarming trends by the Bureau's intelligence investigation practices, suggesting that FBI intelligence investigations have compromised the civil liberties of American citizens far more frequently and to a greater extent than was previously assumed. Only 800 investigations went to the IOC, an average of 2.5 years later. So there were few violators that got rarely investigated and not in a remotely timely fashion.
From the Daily Mail, no more passwords. Obama considers Internet ID for Americans in bid to boost web security. The Obama administration's latest proposal on Internet security has only confirmed a long-held suspicion that people in the Internet community have had regarding companies and governments trying to take away the anonymity of users online. This proposal will aim to facilitate the creation of and eventual spread into a private sector move towards digital identities for use on the Internet. What this will inevitably lead to is a kind of driver's license for the Internet. This will absolutely destroy anonymity online, which is vital for political and social movements, especially in repressive countries.
More from the EFF, sourced from Wired. FCC net neutrality is a regulatory Trojan horse, the EFF says. The EFF warns net neutrality gives the FCC, quote, boundless authority to regulate the Internet for whatever it sees fit. The EFF supports the concept of net neutrality, but finds it to be a paradox to regulate something that is supposed to be free. They don't have any particular suggestions for a solution. I think the FCC should be dissolved as well as other federal bureaucracies. That would be a start. An open source Internet would be cool as well.
From HelpNet Security, private info on Facebook increasingly used in court, the article states that U.S. lawyers have been trying to gain the permission to access the private parts of social network accounts for a while now, but it seems that only lately they have begun to be successful in their attempts. And this turn of events is another perfectly good reason to think twice about what you post online.
Now from the Digital Daily, Connecticut won't press for Google Y-Spy data. It looks to settle. Despite promises by former Connecticut Attorney General Richard Blumenthal to give people a full explanation and gain access to improperly gathered materials, Blumenthal's predecessor, George Jepson, is settling the case behind closed doors. Jepson says it'll save money in court and is a good deal for the state, but Google's terms keep the data collected confidential. It isn't clear what will happen with the data, but it must be really valuable for Google if they're considering data collection as a multi-billion-dollar industry nowadays.
From the 10th Amendment Center, taking back the Commerce Clause in Virginia, some good news coming out of Virginia, where the House of Delegates passed overwhelmingly a bill that states all goods produced or manufactured within the Commonwealth, when such goods are held, retained, or maintained in the Commonwealth, should not be subject to federal law, federal regulation, or the constitutional powers of the United States Congress to regulate interstate commerce. Put simply, the feds would not be able to regulate guns, plants, food, or anything else that is produced within the state of Virginia. This is a huge blow to the powers of the federal government and an exciting trend that seems to be spreading across the country. Whether it is people in Kentucky and Michigan standing up for gun rights, or people in California and other medical marijuana states standing up for the right to decide on your own medicine, people are fed up with the feds.
Now from Breitbart, U.S. Supreme Court issues landmark decision, Constitution is void. False charges against a Mr. William M. Windsor were rebuffed in court with witness testimony, but a judge ruled he should not have fought the case and now owes for the legal fees of his accuser. In appeals, the higher courts rubber-stamped the ruling, and the Supreme Court issued a one-word response of denied in Windsor's last possible appeal, which is a case alleging corruption in the lower courts. Windsor intends on writing a book saying, quote, I have discovered that the federal judges in Atlanta, Georgia, Washington, D.C., and the justices of the United States Supreme Court function like common criminals, intentionally making bogus rulings against honest people while covering up the crimes of their fellow judges. My charges have been totally ignored by the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, and Congress. I do not believe there's a shred of decency, honesty, or constitutional rights in our federal courts. In my opinion, we now live in a police state. Your life savings can be stolen by a federal judge, and they have no risk in violating every law in the book. In my opinion, this is the most serious issue that our country has ever faced. Our rights have been stolen, and the mainstream media refuses to cover this story. I believe our only hope in America is if the masses become aware of what is taking place.
From the Washington Times, China-style dictatorship of climatologists, James Hansen, a NASA laboratory head, has praised the Chinese government for its policies on carbon taxes and that China has the capacity to implement policy decisions rapidly. Yes, of course China can implement policies rapidly because it's a totalitarian state. That's not something we should wish to emulate. One of the things this country prides itself on is the system of checks and balances that slow the process of legislation or policy decisions. This is because too often tyrannical laws are rammed through legislative bodies with terrible consequences later. A good example being the Patriot Act in our country.